name is Lon Safko, co-author of the Social Media Bible, published by John Wiley & Sons, the largest book ever written on the subject of social media. And today we are here with Kevin Marks from Google, but actually he's representing OpenSocial. So Kevin's going to tell us all about OpenSocial here today, so let's just get started. So Kevin, please, can you tell our listeners what OpenSocial is and how you're changing the world with this?
So OpenSocial is a way to provide social infrastructure for the web. What it is a way of expressing information about people and about their friendships that can be reused by different sites and different applications. So it's a common standard for the social web. It's currently deployed to a large number of social networking sites, including MySpace, Orkut, High5, Friendster, and several others in different countries around the world, totaling over 350 million users. And we expect that to continue growing as more sites pick it up over the next few months.
Wow, 350 million users, and you're bringing in companies from not just the United States, but all over the world.
Very much so. We've got sites in China and Korea, European countries, South America. It's basically what you find is there are different social network sites in different countries, but they all have a lot in common, and we can provide a common API that fits into all of them.
What a monumental task. Wow. And so the good thing about this is you'd mentioned there's 350 million users out there. That's a huge number. And really the work that you guys are doing is kind of behind the scenes, and it's really transparent to the user, other than the user themselves are actually getting a better, more easy to use, robust product.
Well, that's the point. I mean, the problem at the moment with building a social application is that you have to gather the data. So that means you have to put up a form for the user to fill in, to get them to give you their name and their date of birth and zip code and whatever else you want from them. So that's quite a barrier that you put up in front of the users, and that you'll lose a lot of them when they have to fill in that form. And then again, if you actually want to do something that relates to fully social stuff rather than just personal stuff, you've then got to ask them who their friends are, which means they've got to go around and find all their friends who are members of that side. Mm-hmm. Now, the first time you do that, that's quite fun. If you join a large social network and you've got some friends on it, you can go around poking around, looking at them and discovering stuff about them. But if you have to do that for every site you sign up for, that becomes a chore very quickly, and people are reluctant to do it. And then you get sort of bad workarounds that people come up with, like, give me your password and email for your web email site, and we'll draw on your address book from that. And that's training people to give away their passwords to the website.
Good point.
And it's also drawing on potentially a broader set of data than you were happy sharing with them. So the value of the OpenSocial model is that you can have one or more of these trusted containers, trusted custodians of your data that you store the information in, and you can run an application that you give permission to draw on that data, so that it can know about you and about your friends and use that to customize the experience that it's having. So by sort of delegating some of your trust to the container site, that container site is then on your behalf giving that information through to the application, making sure that it doesn't get more than it needs to do the task it's trying to do, rather than just giving it a free pass and your entire access to your entire online presence. So there's value there's value for the site developer because they're able to draw on this larger pool of information, and there's value for the user because they don't have to re-enter all the data. And the value in that case for the container side comes in connecting them to the rest of the web and knowing what other things you're doing apart from what you're just doing in that site.
And that makes a lot of sense, too, because what I also heard, too, is the different sites really have different applications as well. Because that's true in real life. I have different social situations. The people that I work with, the people that are friends from work, personal friends, relatives, family members, those I all interact differently with and exchange really kind of different information, and the relationships are different.
Right, and you don't necessarily want them all connected together. So you may not want to pick one site and put everything in that, though some of the sites are getting quite good at managing subsets of people. But quite often you'll find that the soccer team has one particular way of organizing themselves. They've set themselves up a group on some site, and you're using that. You may be using LinkedIn for professional networking and keeping track of hiring people and so on. And so it's quite likely that you will have more than one presence on the web. And you may want to connect some of those together, and you may want to keep some of them distinct. And the point is that you should be in control of that and not have to push everything into one site, or go around, or conversely, go and tell every site on the web the same bit of information over and over again. So the point is, as you said earlier, to try to make this stuff invisible to the users. Just it'd be a natural expectation for them that they can share personal and friendship information with sites that they go on the web, but with some trust in that they're going to behave sensibly with it and not abuse it. And that's a sort of a key part of OpenSocial is the user being in control of the information that's shared.
And I love that because writing the Social Media Bible, I have somewhat of a responsibility to participate in quite a few different groups. And I got to tell you, filling out every one of those profiles with identical information, even copy and paste, requires a tremendous amount of effort. So something like OpenSocial would really kind of speed that up and help and make sure that the information is transferred accurately as well.
Right.
And another thing is that we were lucky enough to be able to interview Mark Cantor. He's the founder and president, CEO of Broadband Mechanics. In a previous iteration, he was the founder of Macromedia and Flash. And one of the things that he's working on is OpenID, and he's been kind of talking about that for a really long time. How does social media and OpenID, how do they kind of integrate?
So OpenID lets you, basically what it lets you do is prove that you own a website. That's its sort of simplest function. It grew out of Brad Fitzpatrick work on LiveJournal and other blogging systems to let people identify which blog was theirs, because blogs are a good example of URLs that represent people. If you blog about somebody else, you link to their blog URL and say Kevin said or whatever to represent them. So that's a case where people are using URLs to refer to each other. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about a URL as opposed to an email address is that you can then go and fetch that URL and get extra data from it as well. Mm. With your email address, all I can do is annoy you. I can send you an email, or I can give that to somebody else and they can send you email. And if I want to interact with you, I end up having to email you a URL, and you click on it and you come back to the site. With an OpenID, then you've got a URL that identifies you, and that means that a program can fetch that URL and use that as a route to get access to more data, whether it's public data by reading the web page, or whether they do an authorization handshake using OAuth or OpenSocial and draw other data out from it that way. So OpenID is a sort of a piece of this ecosystem because it's a way of proving that you own a URL. I mentioned OAuth just then. Mm-hmm. OAuth is open authorization. What that lets you do is give one site permission to have access to your data on another site. But it's a granular permission. You can give permission for some data and not others, and you can always revoke it in future. So you're basically giving them a valet key that says you can do these certain things but not everything else, and I can revoke that so you can't have it in future. So that's a way for one site to draw on another site's information over time, which means that as you change the information on the custodian site, the other sites that draw on that will get the up-to-date information too without you having to re-enter it. So those two work together, and then OpenSocial draws on these underlying standards and specifies the information content layer. So it says, well, here's what a personal profile looks like. We looked at a whole bunch of different sites and found what elements they had in common, and we've defined them so that we can find names and photographs and birth dates and so on, and a bunch of other fields that we found quite a lot of the sites had, including things like what your favorite music is, what your favorite books are you a smoker, stuff like that. We found there were a lot of fields a lot of them had in common, so we codified those. The other thing that OpenSocial lets you do is lets you store data or persist events that are tied to a user's identity, and then get back information about those events or about that data for both the user and the user's friends. So there's a kind of awkward problem that you get when you've got a large collection of data about deciding what's important to the user, being able to draw back just a subset that relates to that user and their friends means that your application can do something much more interesting because as a user, you really care about what your friends think. And if I can give you some information that has a photograph and name of your friend next to it, that's much more interesting to you than coming from a random user or coming from a site in general. So it helps provide that kind of social filtering of whatever information your application is working on.
And that's true, that point that you made about social network or trusted network is really important. I mean, I think it's really the root of what's really driving social media, and it does for me. For example, anytime I need to hire somebody or to find a particular vendor, the first thing I'll do is I'll go to my colleagues or trusted network and kind of ask around if they have any experience with a particular vendor. And if I get a good report, then at least I know based on my respect for that colleague that recommendation is going to be pretty reasonable, so that it's a lot safer going that way than, say, going outside of the network and just going through the yellow pages.
Right. I mean, there's a great thing that Douglas Adams wrote that said the vast majority of our brain is based on deciding who to trust. You know, we evolved this complicated empathy and evaluation mechanism in our heads to decide who to trust because that was vital to our survival. And so that's not something you can straightforwardly replicate in a computer, deciding whose information you trust. But if we can have the information tied to the people that you recognize, then you can apply the trust metrics you have in your head. So you know one friend's good for recommending restaurants, another one's good for recommending books to read, and one would be a great one to tell you where to get your car fixed. And you know that about those people. So when you ask the question, if you can rate their expertise in those areas yourself, without the computer having to do that for you, because you're relying on the knowledge you already have about those people in your head to evaluate it.
That's really kind of like psychologically profound. That's pretty cool. I never really actually thought about it in psychological terms, but that's absolutely right. And if we can actually get an API, a platform, a technology that can help assist us in sorting all of that out, gee, that would be really a tremendous helpful tool.
Right, and that's the thing, because to actually tell the computer all that information and knowledge that you have about people, it would be really hard and wouldn't be worth your while to do. But you have all that tacit knowledge of the people you've met and what you think about them, that you can then use that to color the information you see coming in. Conversely, once you're connected to a set of people and you're getting updates from them and information about them, you can that will help drive your opinion of them in the future. That's one of the things you see with the activity streams in Facebook or in Twitter or these friend feeds, these applications that give you a flow of information about people. If they're people you don't know, it just looks like a noise and a mess. If they're people you do know, it becomes sort of interesting signals and bits of knowledge about them that you can, take in and respond to or not respond to. But if you look at the public Twitter stream, it's a bunch of random weirdness from strangers. If you look at your personal one, it's, oh, my friend's in New York today. And that's a very different bit of information because the context is supplied by you, because you've conveyed the context of who you're interested in. And the value of the social networks is that they have all these different contexts for all the individuals, which means any application that's presenting information can present it filtered through those contexts so that your friends mediate the information and make it make sense for you. And that's the sort of value that's brought. But it's hard to do without a rich set of connections and information about who knows whom. So being able to bridge that information from the sites that have lots of it to any given individual application is what OpenSocial provides.
Well, one of the other things that I'm hearing, too, is there's been a lot of concern. I mean, there's always concern and paranoia about personal information being distributed through the Internet and actually kind of losing control. And there's an example, and I won't name the name of the company, but they made a little bit of a mistake when people could go and check all of the websites that their friends have been surfing. Well, maybe there's some websites that their friends didn't want them to know that they were surfing. And that kind of put a scare into this kind of open social, open information exchange. Because getting personal information is one thing, getting behavioral information is another way to collect, such as the information that Google uses when you're using Gmail and it's pulling keywords out of your email and serving the appropriate advertising. But what I'm hearing here is that OpenSocial really isn't kind of really a free-for-all for information exchange, that the user themselves really can pick what's personal, what's private, what's behavioral, there is control on this.
Well, that's right. The point is that you want to make sure that information is not shared without your permission. You don't want two different identities joined up. You don't want your LinkedIn profile connected to your Suicide Girls profile necessarily, unless that's something you've chosen to do. So part of this is making people facet their online existence. They segment it by using different sites for different purposes, and sometimes there's value in connection, and sometimes you want to keep them separate, and you want to stay in control of that. And there's a danger in putting everything into one specific site and trusting that to do everything, because it can cause data to leak without realizing that's a problem to you. It can decide to change the way the information flows and then accidentally cause you some embarrassment because you thought things that were in two separate compartments no longer are. So one of the things that's been part of the design of OpenSocial is this idea of the user giving permission and authentication through OAuth before any connections can be made, but also for the because there's this separation between the application and the container that's supplying the data. There's a sort of policy layer there as well. So different containers can impose different policies to fit in with the sort of social understanding, the social contract they have with their users. So, for example, some sites, the assumption is that anything you say on the profile is public and visible to everyone. Other sites, it's only visible to a select group of friends. You can just, and there are, some of them will let you choose different levels of permission for different fields. So when you install an application, there's an expectation on the fully public side that it could see everything, but there's an expectation on the private side that it can only see things that it's been given permission to see. Now, understanding that as an application programmer is hard, and you're liable to make mistakes if you're just told, oh, you're not supposed to show that to people. But by just calling an API and saying, can I have information about this, and then the container can impose its policy and say, well, that information is public, yeah, you can have that. That's private, we're going to have to ask permission of the user before you can have that.
Nice.
The app doesn't need to know that detail, and it doesn't even need to know that it has been denied the data. It might just not exist there.
Wow.
So there's this sort of separation layer between the app and the container, which provides a trust boundary. So you can say, okay, I've trusted this container with a lot of information, but I'm only giving some of that over the line to this embedded application.
So, and this is controllable by the user.
Well, it's controllable by the user potentially, or it's controllable by the container, because the container sets policy, sort of general policy for all users, and takes their expectations into account. The way any given site behaves has something to do with its history of the different kinds of users that have come there and the way they've shaped that site.
Expectations.
So there's a set of expectations there. So this isn't like you get a terms of service that you click through when you join the site, and nobody reads those. But by the practices you do on that site, that defines the information that site has and the expectations you have for that site. And the sites can understand those expectations and not violate those for you, so that when an app runs within that environment, it will take on the context of that environment and the social mores of that environment, so that it will see more or less information depending on what you've decided to share with that site, and more or less of your friends' information in the same kind of way.
Well, I like that, and I think when people realize that OpenSocial, OpenID, that really there's some controls on it, and the information isn't getting exchanged freely. I mean, I'm excited to hear that, because yes, if I give certain information to my MySpace account, well, then I pretty much want that as somewhat public information, maybe only from my friends, because, as you know, you can't view a lot of information in MySpace unless you invite a friend. And one of the things that I find interesting, too, is that after talking to HR managers, an awful lot of them actually go in and look at clients or potential employees' MySpace pages to really kind of find out what they're doing on their off hours. So if you've got a lot of pictures of you up there being drunk at the local party last Friday, probably doesn't play well with an HR manager who's looking to hire you. So these different levels of information, I think, is really important.
Well, that's part of this compartmentalization issue. Yes, is understanding who has access to what, and people may not understand directly what they're sharing with whom. That can be part of the problem with the sites that that haven't thought this through in detail. That's true. That reminds me of another aspect of this, which is that the other thing that we're seeing with OpenSocial is that by abstracting away the social infrastructure, that can actually apply in more than one kind of context. So I've mostly been talking about social network sites up to now because they're the ones that took this up first, but we're starting to see other kinds of sites work with OpenSocial as well. One example is is like dashboard sites. If you think about iGoogle or MyYahoo, those are much less personal profile sites as information dashboards on the web that draw in information from outside.
Yeah, mashups.
And yeah, there are basically lots of little things that you embed in there that tell you stuff about the world. But those have the same problem that the websites do, which is for each of them you've got to say, well, actually, I'm in this zip code, I care about news about this topic, and tell them all that stuff about yourself. And they don't really have any context about you. So by applying that, by creating a sort of shared context across the whole site, then these individual applications can draw on that without you having to re-enter the data. So that's an area we're going to see expansion in soon when iGoogle launches and when we see this with these other dashboard-type sites.
That's a really good point, too, because, every little widget requires pretty much the same information on, about me in order to function properly, and if that could just be automatic. I mean, kind of like Apple uses Keychain for passwords. I love that. And remember me on a website because it saves me the trouble of having to remember and to put in all those passwords every time.
Right. So you can imagine the environment having that context for you and supplying to the different applications. Another kind of container that we're starting to see being built is if you think of, and you were talking about HR reminded me, if you think about customer relationship management sites like Salesforce or Oracle CRM, they have large databases of people and information about them. And they have a similar issue of wanting to be able to do innovative things with that and build new applications around it. What we found when talking to them was that OpenSocial actually fits that as well. In that case, you've still got the same thing of you can have some knowledge about the person using the system because you've logged in to use it, so you can know about them and their friends and colleagues. But because you've got a database of customers, you can have the profile page is the customer page, the information about the customer that the company has created about them. And so you can use that as an input to the applications too, and again draw on the information about the person using the site and the information about the customer, and embed applications in that as well. So it was the same model actually fits in several different places. There's this idea of the viewer of the page and the owner of the page, and who the owner is varies depending on what kind of site this is. The normal social network, it would be your profile. In a dashboard, the viewer and the owner are always the same. And in a CRM system, the viewer is the user, and the owner is potentially the customer that you have information about. So we've got this sort of, by coming up with this common abstraction, we found that it fit a very broad range of possible sites, which meant that the applications can really move between many different kinds of sites and still make sense.
Wow. That's exciting. I never really thought about applying this OpenSocial to all these different, everything from widgets to social networks to passwords to pretty much any form or any place that you enter information on the Internet.
So, that's right. So you mentioned widgets. That was the first iteration of OpenSocial, the thing that's widely deployed now. That was designed for running gadgets inside sites. So you've basically got an application embedded inside another site. And there's a bunch of advantages to that, because that means that the embedded application gets access to all the site's users, and the authentication is much easier because the site is managing that for you, because it's wrapping that up, the gadget up inside it. So that was the version that we've now got currently deployed to a lot of sites. But something that's coming in the next iteration of OpenSocial, version 0.8, which is coming out over the next month or so, that has what we're calling REST APIs, which means that you can do server-to-server calls, which means that one web server or one web application on one server can call into the social network remotely, find out information about you, and use that while you're surfing the web, and it can feed updates of what you've done on that site back to the home site. Now, obviously, that's one of these places where you've got to be careful about permissions and authentication, which is why it's taken more work to do this than just the embedded applications. But we've got that solved now with OAuth to do the distributed permission. And the value for this is instead of just being able to work on gadgets embedded in a single site, you can have this web-spanning knowledge of who you are by drawing on remote sites which you keep up to date, and by feeding the flow of what you've been doing elsewhere on the web into that stream. So if you go and use a book review site, that could be fed back to your social network so that your friends can know your book reviews on the external site as well. So that's something that's new in version 0.8, and that should extend the range of OpenSocial to a much broader range of websites as well.
And that's also exciting. I saw a presentation done by a company here recently, which kind of scared me, but then when I thought about it, it was fairly simple. And that's the demo was that somebody was looking for a Honda truck, and they viewed a couple of Honda websites, and then eventually they drilled down into the site, found a particular model, a make, a year, and that was the truck that they looked at. Now they decided, well, let's go and see what Nissan has that's comparable. So when they click on just Nissan.com, instead of going to their homepage, that it captured that behavioral information and didn't make them click 10 clicks down. It actually took them to that make, that model, that year, exactly the comparable truck that Nissan made compared to the Honda based on behavioral information, which served up the best possible page instantly. And then, of course, when they went to Toyota, the exact same thing happened.
Wow. Well, that's that's sort of outside the scope of what we're trying to do, but yeah, I can see some potential in that. They're presumably they're running something client side that's keeping track of what you're doing to do that.
Yes.
Right. So that's I could sort of see how you could build that, but that isn't part of this model. This model is sort of server to server data with some assumption that stuff is stored server side. So you could do things a bit like that, but it wouldn't be as implicit as that. You'd have to actually have stored the preferences in one site and then drawn them out on another site.
Sure, but I mean it could very well go that way, where pages are served up very specifically.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing is that if you've given the site permission to know something about you, it can customize the display, and whether that's personal demographic or preference information, or whether it's here's a set of your friends, and what do we know about them? Have they interacted with this site? Because one of the problems you've got with sites is that if you think about comments on sites, there's this problem that when there's a small number of comments, it's fine. When there's a large number of comments, they tend to fail because you can't be bothered to read them all.
Right.
And the normal mode of showing you the comments is they'll be in chronological order with the most recent at the top or something, or maybe in some who replied to whom thing. But that doesn't act as a filter, a good filter a lot of the time. But actually, at that point, you don't want to see all the comments. If it's a restaurant review site, you don't want to see 100 reviews of the restaurant. But if a couple of your friends have reviewed that restaurant, that will be really interesting. And if it could know who your friends were and pop those ones to the top, that would be much more valuable for that site and for you than showing you everything and making you have to flick through it yourself. So it can be subtle adjustments to how information is presented by drawing on this information about you. That is an example of where it could be useful.
That's really powerful. And for the people that might be a little bit afraid of it, too, I mean, we've been kind of used to at least one level of this. I mean, whenever you go to Amazon.com to order a book, it comes back and says, here's the other types of books that people who bought this book also bought, and you may be interested based on the behavioral information of all of the other purchasers.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but that can get mixed up in intent as well. I mean, Amazon has a good signal because they're purchases. So that's a fairly strong signal. So I've actually given them money for something. But it tends to get a bit confused because I've been buying things for my kids as well. Mm-hmm. And so it will sometimes give me this random mixture of things that are things for me and things for them.
This is specific to your network.
Yeah, because the behavioral signals aren't always clear. And, and if, an Amazon that knew what my friends were reading will be really interesting too. I can see that would be powerful. That would be really powerful, and I'd be interested in that as well. Because if I respect somebody, I'd be kind of curious to see the types of books that they're reading because they may interest me as well. And that's exactly the kind of application we've seen on OpenSocial. One of the successful ones is a "What are your friends reading?" type application. Wow, I like that a lot. And it gives you tell it what it makes it quite quick and easy to tell it what you're reading, and it will poke you every now and then, and you finished that yet? That's really good. And then you get this sort of flow of recommendations from it, which is, did you know your friend was also reading this book, or would you like to suggest this book to somebody else?
Wow.
And they just exist by doing that, and then sending you off to Amazon if you want to buy the book, and they take the referral fee. Wow. So I think that was a very clever bit of application design.
That's very, very clever. Wow, kind of contextual sharing through trusted networks.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful. I mean, I'm just thinking that you had this tool set, this skill set, all the different applications that you can apply it to, and it just makes life on the internet that much easier for all of us.
Right.
That's exciting. Now, you actually work for Google, but you're herding cats. You're actually bringing in perceived competitors such as Yahoo, and so trying to get all of these kind of companies into one room. How's that been? Is everybody kind of trusting one another? Or was it tough at the start? Do you have a critical mass?
Well, it was kind of interesting in that when we first started talking about this, how quick they were and happy they were to jump on board and get involved. I think collective action problems are hard. It's always hard to get people to agree to do something. But if you can draw them together, you can often find the common interest. And then what's been going on since now, that was the first launch of this last November, was a lot of people said, yes, we're really interested in this, we'd love to work on it. And then over the last whatever it is, 8 or 9 months, that's what's been going on, and there's a whole bunch of engineering been going on in the spec discussion group. There's 2 open source implementations in the Shindig Apache project, wow, which have been built by people from many different companies, and then they're now deployed on different social networks. So we've got High5 and Orkut are running the same basic underlying code to do the OpenSocial layer, and then we're seeing that Friendster and some of the European networks are running the same code from the other branch of Shindig. So there's actually a lot of collaboration on the core code as well as on the specification. So it's by being able to do that work on the net, that makes it actually much easier to coordinate this work and have stuff happening that way. And by making it open source, you also get this interesting benefit, is that people can get involved with this without actually having to come and talk to us. So we found, a couple of occasions we had, IMEAN went and implemented the OpenSocial from the specification, and then joined the group afterwards and told us they'd done it. That was pretty good. And now they're contributed to the specification, and they're working together that way. Wow. And another company called Arn Labs from Korea, they came to visit here. And I was expecting to give them the OpenSocial is wonderful, you should think about it. And they said, oh, no, we already built it. We downloaded Shindig, we've got it up and running, we translated it to Korean, and we built a developer website in Korean so that Korean people can build applications for it as well. Yeah. So the power of open source and the open web is that by putting stuff out there, it can find, again, in the same way, it can find the people who are interested in it, and they can feed it back into the community. So that's something that we've seen is very strong about this. Wow. And the nice thing about the open source community is that it's mature enough now to have these kind of practices and models like the Apache Foundation. That means that we sort of know how to do this kind of large-scale collaboration between people from different companies now. And that's that's sort of part of the way the web works. Is it's a set of agreements between different people to do the same kind of thing. So this is building on that model and doing the same thing for social as was done for connectivity with TCP/IP and for documents with HTTP and HTML. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, again, I want to just kind of stress is that I hear you mentioning not just companies, but countries, because this isn't just trying to herd the American cats, because, again, we're U.S.-centric, but this really is trying to pull together and I'm going to use the term, trying to pull together the entire world into a standard.
Very much so. I mean, that's part of, to some extent, code is the common language. And, you can run code and it doesn't care what language you're speaking as a user. And the same, and there are cultural differences and things like that, but there's a bunch of commonality between people that actually means that different sites can work together on a standard, even though they may have a different set of users and they may have to adjust how they behave a lot on the particular site for it to work. We are seeing that connection between the different sites. We're also seeing that we're getting developer communities in different countries as well. So there will be a popular local social network that they're excited about, and they'll build an application for that. And then they may think, oh, we could take this to one of the other ones. We could take this to another country, or we could partner with a U.S. company, or we could partner with a German or Korean company to move it to their world. And we're starting to see those kind of connections form as well, because we've got this shared platform that people can build upon. It means that the effort of moving it from country to country, it still takes some work, and you sort of translate it and check for cultural misunderstandings and so on. But that's much easier when you can actually get the code running and then have a conversation with someone in that country who's done something similar already. So we're seeing that community grow, and we've got a series of Google Developer Days that we're organizing across Europe and Asia in the fall that coming up, that we expect to see even more of this. We're going across Europe, and then we're going across Asia and meeting developers in each country and working with the social networking companies in each country as well to bring those together. So a lot of this is, it's not so much organization as just creating a space for people to get together and helping them do that.
Wow. Again, that's if someone approached me and said, how would you like to try to manage a project like this, it would scare the heck out of me. But it sounds like that because it's the right thing to do, it benefits everybody, it seems to be kind of spreading virally, and people really are cooperating because they know it's in the best interest of everyone, including themselves personally.
Well, it's setting up the system such that you can collaborate on the thing. You can agree to agree and you can agree to disagree. So you can find the stuff you will have in common and agree that, and then you can find the places that are a little bit different and specify a way to ask the question, so that the programmer can say, what can I do on this site? Can I send messages to people? Can I see who's browsing the page, or do they have to log in first? Ask those kinds of questions, and then write an application that does different things depending on the answers, and then it will work across a broader range of sites than just having a single assumption about how behavior works.
Right. Wow. Wow. Man, those are some really incredible insights. And as not being an API developer or a code developer any longer, I wasn't really aware. I mean, I've heard the term, I've read some articles about it, but I really didn't understand how profound it's going to affect me as a user. And again, the most important thing that I'm seeing here is that all of this really is going to benefit the user, but it's also going to be done in a very intuitive, very protective, and a very transparent way.
Well, that's the thing. It has to be. The other thing about creating a collaborative project like this is that it has to proceed by agreement. So if there isn't agreement, then that piece won't proceed. So as long as you can not make those bits block the other bits, it can keep growing. So what we started out with something fairly straightforward that was just exchanging IDs and photos and names, and then we went through and looked at all the sites and saw what they had in common and grew that to a broader profile. And then in the latest iteration, we've added a few more fields to that profile and refined it a bit further. And one of the things we added was a way for one site to represent an account on another site, so they can actually start bridging together. So there's a sort of series of these things that you add where you say, okay, we can see that this stuff makes sense, and then you find, oh, someone's built this other thing that would be useful too. Can we add that into this thing and grow the agreement as well? And as long as you start from a core of stuff that actually works and grow it, you're much more likely to get somewhere interesting than if you try and define the whole space to begin with and start with the entire universe and specify that. But you start with a core of agreement and see how you can grow the agreement.
Makes a lot of sense. That really makes sense. Wow. Well, lastly, is there anything else that you'd like to add to our listeners, for the most part, are users, and probably very few of them are really familiar with open source. Anything that you want to kind of summarize what the future is, or what they can look out for, how to participate?
The thing to think about is the big sort of mental model shift is to stop thinking I'm building a website and to say I'm building a web application that will go and find its users. How can I separate the application itself from the information about the users it needs? Because if you build to that model, it means you can take the application and move it through all these different sites with their 350 million users and more coming, rather than have them all have to go to your site and tell you everything and be over again. So I suppose what I'm saying is no website is an island anymore. But you can take your application and move it through other people's sites and help it find the people that are interested in it. That's the sort of the key transition here is moving from I'm a standalone site on the web, come find me, to I'm an application that moves through the web to find the people that are interested in it.
Wow. Wow. That is awesome. So basically, when you go home at night and you get in your car and you turn the key, you look in the rearview mirror and you say, I'm changing the world.
Well, little bits of it. That's the idea.
A piece at a time.
Making the web better.
I love it. So, Kevin, is there any place at all that people can find more information? Is there any blogs or websites, or if they're interested in getting more information about the work that you're doing on OpenSocial?
If you go to OpenSocial.org, that's the best place to start. That has information about OpenSocial and links to development resources and up-to-date news and so on.
Excellent. That's really excellent. So I'd really like to thank Kevin. Thank you so very much, really, for being here and for sharing your time with us and talking about OpenSocial. I learned an awful lot. I truly appreciate this. And this has been Lon Safko, the co-author of the Social Media Bible, published by John Wiley and Sons. Be sure to check out our other valuable social tactics, tools, and strategies that can be found in the Social Media Bible, as well as its companion website, www.thesocialmediabible.com. And for more information about me, Lon Safko, or to learn how I can speak at your company or next event, please go to www.lonsafko.com. And Kevin, again, thank you so very much for being here, and thank you for our listeners.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.